What would you do if the beggar you despised yesterday and humiliated without mercy was actually the absolute master of your destiny tomorrow? Alaric of Valerius possessed more ancient wealth in his vaults than the weight of his own immortal shadows. But on that night of a howling storm in 1890, he arrived at the gates of Larkfield Manor, covered in mud, shivering, and feigning to be a mere wretch of the earth. He was searching for a truth that gold could never purchase, a heart that would not sell itself to the highest bidder. While everyone spat at him and slammed their doors in his face, only one hand reached out through the darkness with a crust of dry bread and a tattered blanket. She did not know that with that single gesture, she was nourishing the man who could either destroy her world or save her soul for eternity. This is the tale of a righteous lie that revealed the purest love, and how simplicity triumphed over the cold poison of greed. The rain lashed against the windows of the main mansion of Larkfield Manor, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for the moral decay that lived within those stone walls. Outside, the wind howled with the ferocity of a starving wolf, a sound that seemed to carry the echoes of ancient forgotten spirits. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace and the rhythmic clinking of crystal glasses attempted to shroud an undeniable and bitter reality. The Alaric family, no, the Arthur family, was in utter ruin, though they refused to admit it to the world. Arthur the patriarch, with a silver mustache and a gaze of iron severity, paced back and forth across the main hall, adjusting a velvet vest that had clearly seen better decades. His two eldest daughters, Isabella and Cassandra, were the living portraits of desperate vanity. Isabella, clad in a crimson silk dress that was excessively tight, stared into the gilded mirror, pinching her cheeks to force color into her pale skin. "Father, are you entirely certain the Duke of Montrose will pass through this route?" asked Cassandra, fanning herself with frantic impatience, though the room was chilled by the draught. "We have been waiting for hours, and my curls are beginning to fail under this wretched humidity." "Silence!" Arthur roared, his voice echoing against the high ceilings. "My informants assure me that the Duke travels incognito through this region, seeking new lands to expand his dominion. If we can convince him to lodge here tonight, one of you two must conquer him. We need that fortune. I do not care what you must do to achieve it. Smile until your jaws ache, and charm him until he forgets his own name." In a darkened corner of the hall, almost blending into the shadows of the worn velvet curtains, stood Ilara. Unlike her sisters, she wore neither silk nor jewels. Her dress was of a simple dove-gray cotton, clean but patched at the elbows, and her chestnut hair was pulled back into a practical braid that fell down her back. Ilara did not participate in the frantic conversation. She was busy gathering the cake crumbs that Cassandra had carelessly dropped onto the floor, acting more like an invisible servant than the youngest daughter of the house. Ilara was the simple one, the one without ambitions of grandeur, the one who found solace in the ancient books of the library and in the care of the garden that her sisters ignored. Suddenly, a heavy rhythmic thud resounded against the massive oak front door. Arthur's eyes glittered with an unholy greed. "It must be him. Quickly take your positions," he commanded, smoothing his thinning hair with trembling fingers. "Ilara, hide yourself in the kitchen. I do not want your beggar-like appearance to frighten away our noble guest." Ilara lowered her head, accustomed to the sting of his contempt, and retreated toward the shadows of the hallway, though she remained close enough to observe the encounter. The butler pulled open the door, and a gust of freezing wind and rain invaded the foyer, extinguishing two of the candles on the grand chandelier. But a duke dressed in ermine and gold did not enter. Instead, The figure that crossed the threshold was tall and hunched, wrapped in a wool cloak so caked with grime that it looked like solid earth. The man pulled back his hood, revealing a face marked by exhaustion, a 3-day beard, and dark, piercing eyes that scanned the room with an intensity that was deeply unsettling. His boots left puddles of muddy water on the fine Persian rugs. "Good evening," the stranger said, his voice raspy, yet oddly firm. "Forgive the intrusion at such an unseasonable hour. My horse has injured its leg 2 leagues from here, and the storm prevents me from continuing on foot. I seek shelter, and if possible, a bit of work in exchange for food. I am Alaric, a distant cousin of your branch from the south. Though fortune turned its back on me long ago." The silence in the room was sepulchral. Isabella's practiced smile contorted into a grimace of absolute disgust. Cassandra recoiled, covering her nose with a perfumed handkerchief, as if the man emanated a mortal plague. Arthur, turning red with a rage fueled by his shattered expectations of a wealthy noble, stepped forward menacingly. "Cousin," he spat the word with venom. "I have no beggar cousins, and if I did, I would not let them through the front door to soil my rugs. What audacity to present yourself here looking like a swineherd and begging for charity." "I only ask for a dry corner, Uncle Arthur," Alaric responded, maintaining a chillingly calm demeanor. Under the wet folds of his cloak, his fists tightened, though his expression remained neutral. "I have lost everything to the games and poor investments. I have only my hands left to work." "Then use them to get out of here," shrieked Isabella. "Father, remove this vagabond before he steals the silver. He smells of the stables." Ilara, watching from her hiding place, felt a sharp pang in her chest. She saw the humiliation in the man's shoulders, but she also saw something else, a strange, quiet dignity. He did not plead with desperation. He waited, observing, judging in silence. She could not bear the cruelty of her kin. Stepping out from the shadows, she spoke with a voice that was soft, but crystal clear. "Father, the storm outside is terrible. The river might overflow. We cannot cast out a relative, however distant, to perish in the cold. That is not a human way to act." All eyes turned toward her. Alaric lifted his gaze, and his eyes met Ilara's. For a heartbeat time seemed to fracture and stand still. He saw a young woman, without ornaments, without paint upon her face, with hands reddened by labor, but with a gaze so clean and compassionate that it shone brighter than any false diamond her sisters wore. "You be silent, useless girl!" Arthur shouted. "No one gave you permission to speak. But thinking on it, perhaps we do need someone to clean the pigsties tomorrow, since the stable boy has vanished." The patriarch looked at Alaric with supreme disdain. "Very well, cousin. You may stay tonight, but not under this roof. You will sleep in the barn with the beasts, which is where it seems you belong, and tomorrow you will labor to pay for the very air you breathe on my lands. Now, out of my sight." Alaric bowed his head slightly, hiding an ironic and dangerous smile. "I thank you, Arthur. Straw is a sufficient bed for a man who has nothing or who appears to have nothing." The night deepened, and the grand mansion fell into a hollow silence, but in the barn the cold was a biting physical presence. Alaric had settled himself onto a pile of dry hay without removing his damp boots. He stared up at the wooden rafters of the ceiling, his mind drifting to his own palace, 100 times larger than this manor, and to silk sheets that never provided him warmth because they were void of any real affection. He had come to test whether disinterested kindness still existed in this world, and the Arthur family had failed the trial spectacularly. He was prepared to leave at dawn and strike their names from his ledgers of mercy forever. Suddenly, the barn door creaked on its rusted hinges. Alaric tensed his hand, instinctively moving toward the dagger hidden beneath his rags, a blade with a ruby-encrusted hilt that was worth more than the entire Larkfield estate. He relaxed his grip when he saw who was entering. It was her, the girl in the gray dress. Ilara entered with stealth, shielding the flickering flame of a single candle with her palm. Under one arm she carried a thick wool blanket, and in her other hand she held a steaming plate covered with a clean cloth. "Mr. Alaric," she whispered, approaching with caution so as not to startle the horses. "I knew they would not have given you supper." He sat up, fascinated by her presence. In the golden glow of the candle, Ilara's simplicity acquired an ethereal beauty. There was no artifice in her only truth. "Will they not punish you if they discover you here feeding the beggar?" he asked, his voice losing its feigned roughness and becoming deep grave and undeniably masculine. "Probably," she admitted with a sad half-smile as she set the plate on a wooden crate. "But hunger hurts more than my father's shouting. I have brought beef stew and warm bread, and this blanket was my mother's. It is old, but it holds much warmth." Alaric took the plate. He did not eat with the voracity of an animal as one would expect from a starving vagrant, but with the contained elegance of one who has been educated at the tables of kings. He paused and looked at her intently. "Why do you do this? Your sisters say I am a disgrace. Your father has treated me like a stray dog. Why do you risk yourself for me?" Ilara sat on a bale of hay across from him, hugging her knees. "Because poverty is not a sin, sir. The only true sin is cruelty. You said you lost your fortune. I believe that sometimes losing your gold is the only way to see who your friends truly are." Her words struck Alaric in the chest like a hammer. It was exactly what he felt. It was the very reason for his absurd disguise. "You are very wise for someone so young. What is your name?" he asked, feeling an immense desire to kiss her hand, a gesture he suppressed to avoid betraying his identity. "Ilara. Just Ilara. Tell me, Ilara, if you had one wish, if a fairy godmother or a wealthy duke appeared, what would you ask for? Dresses like your sister's jewels that catch the light." Ilara laughed softly, a sound that warmed the cold air of the barn. "Oh no. Dresses are tight, and jewels are heavy. I would ask for freedom. I would ask for a small house with many books where no one screams at me for being who I am. And perhaps someone who looks at me without seeing right through me, as if I were made of glass." Alaric set the plate aside. For the first time in 5 centuries since the world had grown cold and his heart had turned to stone, he felt that his chest was thumping with a terrifying force. There, amidst the smell of hay and rain before a woman dressed in gray, the most powerful king in the region felt unworthy. "Sometimes, Ilara," he said, intensely leaning toward her, "wishes are fulfilled in the strangest ways. And sometimes princes do not wear crowns, but cloaks filled with mud." "Sit!" She looked at him, puzzled by the sudden shift in his voice, so secure, so powerful, so different from the defeated cousin who had walked through the door. There was a silence charged with an electric tension. He reached out, and with infinite delicacy brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His fingers brushed her skin, and she shivered, not from the cold, but from a sudden warmth that raced down her spine. "I must go before the sun rises," she whispered, breaking the spell, frightened by the intensity in his dark eyes. "Please eat. Tomorrow my father will be hard on you. He will try to break your spirit with heavy labor." "Let him try. Alaric responded with a wolfish smile she couldn't quite interpret. I am more resilient than I appear. Thank you, Alara. I shall never forget this night. She rose, gathered her candle, and walked toward the exit. Before closing the door, she turned one last time. Good night, cousin Alaric. May God bless you. When the door clicked shut, Alaric of Valerius stood up. He brushed the hay from his cloak, but there was no longer any exhaustion in his posture. He stood at his full, imposing height, radiating the authority of a king. He pulled from his boot a small leather pouch filled with gold coins, weighed it in his hand, and then tucked it away again. No, Ilara. He whispered into the darkness with a solemn promise. I have already been blessed by finding you, and I swear by the memory of my ancestors that every tear you have shed in this house shall be repaid with diamonds, and every insult you have received shall be returned with justice. Tomorrow the game begins, my dear Arthur family, and you are going to lose everything. Meanwhile, in the house, Arthur snored, dreaming of riches, unaware that he had just sent to sleep with the pigs, the only man who could save him, and that his despised daughter had just won the heart of the lion. But destiny is capricious. The morning would bring a black carriage that would change the rules of the game forever. The dawn at Larkfield Manor did not bring hope, but rather the rhythmic and brutal sound of steel meeting wood. The sun was barely peeking over the hills, tinting the sky a pale violet, when Alaric of Valerius had already been working for 2 hours. Arthur had not lied. He intended to wring every last drop of energy from his poor cousin. Alaric stripped of his cloak, and wearing only a coarse linen shirt rolled up to his elbows, swung the axe over the oak logs with a controlled violence. Each blow was a release. With every impact he imagined he was shattering the chains of hypocrisy that bound the high society he belonged to. His body, sculpted by centuries of training in swordsmanship and riding, was not that of a famished beggar, and the muscles of his back tensed visibly under the sweat-dampened fabric. From the second-floor balcony, Isabella and Cassandra watched the scene as they ate their breakfast. "Look at him sweat," Isabella mocked, nibbling on a piece of toast with jam. "He is like a beast of burden. I cannot believe he shares our blood. It is truly repulsive." "At least he is useful for something," Cassandra laughed, adjusting a silk ribbon in her hair. "Father says that if he works like this for a month, we will save the wages of 3 laborers. Imagine a relative who is cheaper than a mule." Alaric heard them. His senses were preternaturally sharp, and the morning breeze carried their shrill voices down to the courtyard. He clenched his jaw, but did not look up. They were not his objective. His eyes discreetly searched for another figure, and there she was. Alara was crossing the yard, carrying a heavy basket of laundry to wash at the river. She walked with her head down, trying to remain unnoticed, but Alaric saw how she paused for a brief moment when she saw him. She did not look at him with disgust or mockery. She looked at him with genuine concern. By mid-morning, when the sun beat down with force and the heat became suffocating, Alaric stopped to wipe his brow. Suddenly, a cool shadow fell over him. Alara was there, holding out a clay bowl of fresh water and a piece of cheese wrapped in a clean cloth. "Drink, please," she whispered, looking nervously toward the house to ensure no one was watching. "My father will make you work until you drop dead if you allow him." Alaric took the bowl, and his fingers brushed hers intentionally. Ilara's skin was soft, despite the hard work she endured. "Thank you, Ilara, but do not worry for me. I have survived storms much worse than your father's ill temper." "It is not just the work," she said. and for the first time she lifted her eyes to look directly into his. She had honey-colored eyes, deep and transparent. It is the humiliation. No one deserves to be treated as if they were worth less than the dust on the road. You have a nobility in your gaze, Alaric, that does not match your clothes. He smiled a genuine smile that lit up his face. And you have the elegance of a queen, and they treat you like a scullery maid. Why do you permit it? Ilara sighed a sound that seemed to rustle the leaves of the nearby trees. Because they are my family, and because I have nowhere else to go. My mother taught me that patience is the greatest virtue. I only hope. She stopped, blushing deeply. What do you hope for? He insisted, stepping closer. The tension between them was palpable, an invisible thread vibrating in the air. I hope to find a place where I can be myself. I have a secret garden behind the old stables. It is the only place where roses bloom in this dry land. There I read, and there I dream. Take me there, he requested, almost like a command, but with a softness that disarmed her. That afternoon, taking advantage of the fact that Arthur and the sisters were napping, Ilara led Alaric to her refuge. It was a forgotten corner of the manor, hidden by stone walls covered in ivy. Inside, it was a miniature paradise. Wild roses, lavender, and jasmine grew in a beautiful anarchy tended by Ilara's loving hands. They sat on a worn stone bench. Alaric, the vampire king, accustomed to the gardens of grand estates and European palaces, found that this small garden was more beautiful than anything he had ever seen, because it had a soul. "What are you reading?" he asked, pointing to an old book resting on the bench. "Poetry," she responded. "It speaks of passions and freedom. My sisters say reading dries a woman's brain, but I think it expands it." Alaric listened to her speak for an hour. She spoke of the stars, of how the roots of trees entwine under the earth, like secret lovers, of her desire to see the ocean one day. She did not mention dresses or balls or titles. In her simplicity, Ilara was infinitely more complex than any woman he had met in centuries. "Ilara," he said, interrupting her softly, "if I told you I was a man marked by fate, that I bring trouble, would you run? We all bring trouble, Alaric. The question is whether we are willing to share it." It was then that Alaric decided to execute the second phase of his plan, the trial of fire. He needed to be absolutely certain. His heart already screamed that she was the one, but his cynical mind, wounded by the past, demanded one last confirmation. That night during dinner, Alaric burst into the main dining room. He had rubbed his eyes so they appeared bloodshot, and his posture was that of a man completely defeated. "Uncle Arthur!" he cried, falling to his knees dramatically at the entrance. The family stopped eating. Isabella let out a huff of annoyance. "What now? Have you broken the axe?" Arthur asked with disdain. "It is worse. Much worse," Alaric said with a cracking voice. "They have found me. I have a gambling debt. $5,000. If I do not pay before the next full moon, they will come for me. They will take me to the city prison, or perhaps they will kill me. By the blood that binds us, I beg you help me." The silence that followed was dense and cold. Isabella and Cassandra exchanged glances and burst into cruel laughter. $5,000, mocked Cassandra. "You wouldn't be worth that much even if we sold your organs. Why should we give you that money?" "It is a fortune," Arthur roared. "Get out of my sight. If you have debts, pay them with your hide. You will not see a single cent from my pocket to save a vicious gambler. Out!" Alaric feigned a sob and retreated, dragging his feet. Their cruelty was expected, but it was a necessary contrast. He returned to the barn and sat in the dark, waiting. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Alaric began to fear he had been wrong about her. Perhaps money was a limit too great even for Ilara's goodness. But then the door opened. Ilara ran in, her face bathed in tears and pale with anguish. She carried a small wooden box in her hands. She knelt before him, not caring about soiling her dress on the stable floor. "Alaric, I heard what they said," she whispered with urgency. "I cannot let them take you to prison. I cannot let you die." She opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were a few copper and silver coins, the savings of a lifetime of privations. But atop the coins rested a shiny object, an ancient gold medallion, with a small ruby in the center. "Take this," she said, placing the box in his hands. "It is not $5,000, I know, but this medallion was my mother's. It is the only thing of value I possess in this world. It is pure gold. If you sell it in the city, they will give you enough to flee far away where they cannot find you." Alaric froze. He looked at the medallion and then at her eyes. She was giving him her past, her only treasure, her security to save a man she had known for barely 24 hours. "Ilara," his real voice. The voice of the king emerged for a moment, filled with uncontrollable emotion. "This medallion is your mother's. You cannot give it to me. A jewel has no life. Alaric, you do. I would rather lose the memory of my mother than know that a good man has died for lack of help. Please take it and go right now. Fly." Alaric closed his hand over the medallion, but not to accept it, but to feel the warmth of her sacrifice. In that moment, the disguise fell away completely within his soul. There were no more doubts. She was the woman he had sought for all his existence. He wanted to confess everything right then, to tell her he could buy the entire manor with the pocket change he carried, that she would be his queen, that she would never have to wash clothes again. But before he could utter a word, a crash from the outside shook the night. The barking of dogs, the neighing of horses, and shouting. "Open up in the name of the law!" a powerful voice shouted from the main courtyard. Ilara stood up with a start, terrified. "They have come for you!" she exclaimed. "Quickly hide in the hayloft. I will distract them." But Alaric knew they were not coming for him. His debts were a fiction. This was something real, something not in his plans. Both left the barn and ran toward the main house. In the courtyard, lit by torches, was a luxurious but sinister carriage painted matte black. A man was descending from it. He was not an officer of the law, but Frederick, a wealthy merchant of the region, known for his immense riches and his depraved reputation. He was 60 years old, with a prominent belly and watery eyes that stripped women with his gaze. Arthur was at the door, trembling, pale as a ghost. "Mr. Frederick, I did not expect you until next week," the father of Ilara stammered. "My promissory notes have expired today, Arthur," the merchant said with an oily, unpleasant voice. "You owe me $50,000, and I know you do not have it. I have come to seize Larkfield Manor. Tomorrow, you and your daughters will be on the street." Isabella and Cassandra began to scream hysterically. Arthur fell to his knees, pleading, "Have mercy, I will give you whatever you want." Frederick smiled, showing yellowish teeth. His eyes scanned the sisters who were crying, and then stopped on Ilara, who stood with Alaric in the shadows. The old merchant licked his lips. He had always had a sickening obsession with the youngest daughter, the simple virgin whose purity excited him more than the vulgarity of the other two. "Whatever I want you say," Frederick repeated. "Very well. There is a way to settle the debt. I will forget the $50,000, and let you live here if you hand over your youngest daughter to me, to Ilara." "To Ilara?" Arthur asked incredulous. "Yes, I want her as my wife this very night. I have a priest waiting in my carriage." Ilara let out a muffled cry and recoiled, bumping into Alaric's chest. He held her tightly, feeling her body tremble violently. A cold fury, much more dangerous than hot anger, began to rise through Alaric's veins. Arthur did not hesitate for a single second. He stood up, brushed the dust from his knees, and looked at his youngest daughter. Ilara stepped forward. "No, father," she cried. "Please, no, he is a monster." "It is your duty to save this family," Arthur roared, recovering his arrogance. "What use have you been all these years with your books and your nonsense? Now you will be useful. You will marry Frederick and save us from ruin." "It is a deal," Arthur declared, shaking the hand of the lustful old man. Frederick advanced toward Ilara with open arms like a vulture about to devour a dove. "Come here, my little flower. I will teach you what it means to be a real woman." Ilara felt like she was dying. The world was closing in on her. She was going to be sold like cattle handed over to a man who caused her physical and moral revulsion. She looked at Alaric with eyes full of tears, saying goodbye in silence, knowing he could do nothing. He was just a beggar, a poor man with debts as powerless as she was. But when Frederick extended his ring-covered hand to grab Ilara's arm, another hand intercepted it. A strong hand calloused from the day's work, but firm as iron. Alaric stepped between the old man and the young woman. His posture had changed. He no longer hunched his back. His chin was high. His gaze was lethal. "Take your filthy hands off her," Alaric said with a voice that resounded in the courtyard with the authority of thunder. "Who are you, you beggar?" Frederick growled, trying to pull away. "Arthur, tell your laborer to step aside, or I will have him whipped." "Get back, you idiot!" Arthur screamed. "You are ruining the deal." Alaric did not move. He looked at Ilara, ignoring the others. "Ilara, listen to me well. You do not have to do this. Do not sacrifice yourself for those who despised you just a minute ago." "I have no choice, Alaric. I am alone." "Yes, you do. Look at me," he asked, taking her face in his hands. "Choose poverty, choose hunger if necessary, but do not choose slavery. Come with me. I have nothing to offer you but my tarnished name and the road, but I swear you shall be free." "Enough of this farce," Arthur shrieked, making a sharp signal to two robust servants. "Grab the vagabond and give him a beating. Ilara, get in the carriage right now." The servants advanced with clubs. Frederick grabbed Ilara's wrist with violence, making her scream in pain. That scream broke the last dam of Alaric's restraint. In one fluid movement, Alaric disarmed the first servant who tried to strike him, snatching the club and using it to strike the second in the knees with military precision. Then he turned toward Frederick. With a single shove, he sent the old merchant rolling across the dirt floor. Chaos erupted. Isabella and Cassandra were screaming. Arthur was running to find a shotgun. Alaric grabbed Ilara by the waist and lifted her with impressive strength onto one of the horses Frederick's men had left untethered. He jumped behind her, taking the reins. "Hold on tight," he ordered into her ear. "Alaric, they will kill us," she cried, terrified, but clinging to his chest. "Let them try," he responded with a defiant laugh. With a kick, the horse reared and shot toward the open gate, galloping into the darkness of the night. They rode deep into the woods under the light of the full moon. Ilara wept, believing they were heading toward a life of fugitives and absolute misery. She did not know that the horse they rode was not heading toward a cave, but toward the wealthiest duchy in the country. She did not know that the man who held her was not fleeing the law, but taking her to his true kingdom. But the night was long, and the road to the truth still had obstacles. As the wind whipped their faces, Alaric knew the moment of revelation was approaching, and he feared Alara's reaction to his lie more than all the mercenaries Frederick could send after them. The frantic gallop of the horse devoured the miles under the silver moonlight, distancing them further and further from Larkfield Manor, and the cruel fate that had awaited Alara. The cold dawn wind bit at their skin, but she barely felt it. The warmth emanating from Alaric's body pressed against her back was an anchor in the middle of the emotional storm shaking her. She clung to his waist with desperation, closing her eyes tight. "We are far now," she murmured, with a voice choked by the noise of the hooves. "Where are we going, Alaric? We have no food or roof. We only have each other, and that small bag with the price of my mother." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he spurred the animal with renewed urgency. Alara noticed something strange. The horse, far from being exhausted, seemed to know the way. Its movements were sure, powerful, worthy of a war horse, and not a stolen farm beast. 2 more hours passed until the sky began to tint with a soft orange and gray. The landscape had changed. The dirt roads full of potholes had given way to paths of white gravel, perfectly maintained, flanked by ancient oaks that formed a majestic vault over their heads. In the distance, endless vineyards stretched out glistening with morning dew and fields of wheat that looked like seas of liquid gold. "Alaric, we must be careful," Alara warned, tensing. "These lands seem to belong to some powerful noble. If they find us here, they will accuse us of trespassing." "No one will hurt us here, Alara," he responded. His voice had changed completely. There was no longer any trace of the submissive or worried tone of the beggar. He spoke with a propriety and a calm that chilled her blood. The horse slowed as they arrived, before immense wrought-iron gates adorned with a coat of arms, 2 lions rampant, holding a sword. Alara held her breath. Behind the gates rose a structure she had only seen in the illustrations of her old books. It was not a house, nor even a mansion. It was a palace. Towers of gray stone rose toward the sky. Crystal windows reflected the sunrise, and marble fountains tossed crystalline water in the front gardens. "Why are we stopping?" she whispered, trembling with panic. "The guards will see us." "I hope they do," Alaric said calmly. Before Alara could protest, 2 men in blue and gold uniforms stepped out of the guardhouses. They carried muskets, but upon seeing the rider, instead of aiming, they lowered their weapons and bowed deeply, almost touching the ground with their foreheads. "His Excellency has returned," one of them shouted. "Open the main gates." Alara felt the world spinning. "Excellency." She looked at Alaric for an explanation, but he kept his gaze fixed on the entrance with the impassive face of a king returning from battle. They traveled the driveway under the astonished gaze of gardeners and stable hands who stopped to remove their hats. Upon reaching the grand main staircase, a dozen servants were already forming a perfect line. An older man dressed in impeccable black descended the stairs hurriedly. "My lord, we were very worried," the man said, taking the reins of the horse. "We feared the incognito trip had suffered mishaps." Alaric dismounted with feline agility and then turned toward Alara, extending his arms to help her down. "Welcome home, Alara," he said. She let herself fall, but her legs failed as they touched the ground, not from exhaustion, but from the impact of reality. She looked at her gray dress, soiled with mud and hay, and then looked at the fine leather boots Alaric now wore, who had removed his tattered cloak to reveal the posture of a natural aristocrat. "Who are you?" she asked, backing away. Her voice was a thread of incredulity and pain. You are not Alaric, the poor cousin. You are him, the Duke of Montrose, the man my father was expecting. I am Alaric of Valerius, Duke of Montrose. Yes, he admitted, trying to step closer, but she retreated again, bumping into the cold marble of a statue. You lied, she cried. Everything was a lie. The hunger, the cold, the debts. You made me give you my mother's medallion. You made me weep for you and fear for you, while you mocked my ingenuity. I never mocked you, Ilara, Alaric said with intensity, closing the distance and taking her by the shoulders, despite her resistance. Listen to me, I needed to know. I had to be sure. Sure of what? That I am a fool who pities beggars? Sure that you were not like them, he roared, losing his composure for the first time. Alaric made a sharp gesture, and the servants dispersed, leaving them alone at the foot of the stairs. The sun now illuminated their faces, hers stained with tears and dust, his tormented by guilt and love. 5 centuries ago, I buried my heart. Alaric began to explain, his voice raspy. I have lived a life of coldness, seen only as a bag of coins, never as a man. I vowed I would never let anyone into my life again unless they loved Alaric the man and not the king. Ilara listened with a racing heart. The anger was still there, but it began to mix with understanding. Alaric reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold medallion. It shone intensely under the sunlight. When you gave me this in the barn, he continued with moist eyes, you did not give me gold. You gave me your life. You stripped yourself of your only security to save a man you believed was worth nothing. In that moment, Ilara, I knew it was you. You are the only truth I have found in a world of hypocrisy. He took her hand and deposited the medallion softly in her palm. Then he did something that left Ilara breathless. He knelt before her right there on the gravel, soiling his fine trousers. Forgive me for the deception. Hate me if you wish for the lie, but do not go. Stay. Let me prove to you that the man you fed in the barn is the same one kneeling here. Look at me, Alaric, she said in a low voice. Look at me truly. I wear rags. I have dirt under my nails. I do not know how to be a duchess. They will eat me alive in your world. Your society will laugh at you for bringing a servant to the palace. Alaric stood up and cradled her face between his hands. Let them laugh, and when they are finished laughing, they will see how I bow to you. You have more nobility in your little finger than the entire royal court combined. Now come. You are in your home. He led her inside. The foyer was a cavern of white marble and crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen tears. Ilara walked with timidity, fearing to soil the floor. Rodolfo, Alaric called to the butler. Prepare the blue suite and call the maids. My guest needs a hot bath, clean clothes, and rest. And let it be clear to everyone, whoever disrespects her insults me. As you command, Excellency. The butler responded without blinking at Ilara's appearance. The following hours were a blur. She was bathed in a porcelain tub with scented water. When she emerged wrapped in a silk robe, she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Alaric had summoned the best tailors and dressmakers in the capital, who had arrived with trunks full of silks, Brussels lace, and Genoa velvets. Ilara stood on a platform while 3 seamstresses adjusted the folds of a midnight blue dress. Straighten your back, my lady, the lead dressmaker said in a kind but firm tone. A duchess does not look at the floor. She looks at the horizon. Ilara obeyed, but felt like an impostor. When the seamstresses left, Alaric entered. Do you feel like a bird in a gilded cage? He asked. I feel like a child playing dress-up, she confessed. Alaric, my hands. She extended her palms, showing the small calluses. These hands have scrubbed floors and milked cows, silk snags on them. I do not want to erase your history, Alara. I want to frame it. These marks are medals of honor. The hands of your sisters are soft because they have never lifted anything heavier than a fan. Yours have held the weight of an entire family. That is what makes you a queen. A distant rumble of wheels on gravel interrupted them. Alaric walked to the window. They have arrived. Below in the main courtyard, the Arthur carriage stopped. Arthur descended first, looking at the palace towers. Isabella and Cassandra descended next, their eyes wide. "Father," Cassandra stammered, "that beggar has brought us to the palace of Montrose. He must work here." "He must be a stable hand," Arthur exclaimed, recovering his arrogance. "He has hidden here and lured us to blackmail us. Guards." 2 sentinels approached. "Announce Mr. Arthur," the patriarch ordered. "I come to recover my daughter kidnapped by one of your servants, a certain Alaric." The guard did not blink. "His Excellency the Duke awaits you in the Hall of Mirrors. Follow me." Inside the palace, they looked with greed at the gold chandeliers. Upon reaching the hall, they saw Alaric sitting in a chair that looked like a throne. At his side stood Ilara in her midnight blue dress. "Welcome to my home," Alaric said, his voice echoing. "You." Arthur pointed a trembling finger. "You are the beggar. I am Alaric of Valerius, Duke of Montrose, and the man you sent to sleep with the pigs 2 nights ago." Isabella let out a muffled cry. Arthur turned red. "Oh, Excellency!" Isabella exclaimed, making a clumsy bow. "What a terrible misunderstanding! We were only testing your humility. It was a joke, a simple family joke." "A joke?" Alaric arched an eyebrow. "Leaving me without food was a joke. Trying to sell your sister to a depraved old man was also part of the joke." "We did it for her own good," Arthur intervened, sweating. "But I see Ilara has been very clever. Daughter, how beautiful you are. I always said you had potential. Come give your father a hug. You can return home with us. And the Duke? Well, the Duke will surely want to compensate us for the trouble." Ilara looked at her father. She saw the falseness in his eyes. "No, father," Ilara said. Her voice did not tremble. "There is nothing to forgive because I have done nothing wrong. I will not return to that house. My home is where I am respected." Arthur's face twisted with rage. "Respect," Cassandra mocked. "Please, Ilara, you smell of the stables. The Duke has dressed you like a doll for a while, but you are not a lady. You are a servant in a stolen dress." "Enough!" Alaric's voice was a whip. He stood up slowly. "In this house, the only person who smells bad is the one with a rotten soul. I have invited you here to give you news. In 3 days, I will celebrate a grand ball. You will also come." "You invite us to the ball?" Isabella asked, hopeful. "I invite you," Alaric continued, "so you can see with your own eyes what you despised. I want you to see Ilara shine. You will stay in the West Wing. My servants will watch you. If you pull a single more tear from her, I swear you will lose more than your reputation." That night, the dinner was a silent battlefield. Ilara looked at the table full of silverware. She felt panic. She looked at Alaric. With an imperceptible gesture, he took his fish fork. Ilara imitated him. He drank a sip of wine. She imitated him. Frustrated, Cassandra accidentally struck a glass of red wine, sending the dark liquid toward Ilara's dress. "Oh, how clumsy!" Cassandra exclaimed. "Look how you have ruined that expensive fabric. It is a signed Duke. Silk is not made for certain people." The wine spread over the blue skirt. Ilara froze. But then Alaric took his own glass and deliberately overturned it over his immaculate black velvet suit. "Accidents happen," Alaric said calmly. "Now we are both stained. If the future Duchess has a stain, then the Duke must have one too." The sun of the morning filtered through the high windows of the library. Faltaban less than 24 hours for the grand ball. In the center of the room, Alaric held Ilara by the waist. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Alaric murmured. "Do not look at your feet, Ilara. Look at me." Ilara lifted her gaze. "I am afraid of stepping on you," she confessed. "Your feet will go where your heart tells them," he responded, pulling her closer. "The waltz is a conversation without words. Do you trust me?" "With my life," she whispered. Alaric began to hum a soft melody. This time, Ilara let herself go, closed her eyes, and allowed his strength to hold her. Suddenly, she was a feather floating in the wind. "You are ready," he said. Meanwhile, in the West Wing, Isabella and Cassandra were plotting. Cassandra held an object wrapped in a handkerchief. "Are you sure it will work?" Isabella asked. "We will not fail," Cassandra assured. "The Duke might forgive poverty, but nobility never forgives theft. This tonight, I will bribe one of the new maids to hide this brooch among Ilara's things. Tomorrow in the middle of the ball, we will demand a search. We will say she stole it from her mother on her deathbed, and then we will tell the Duke the truth about her blood, that she is the bastard of a stable hand." The night of the ball arrived. The palace was transformed into a fairy tale stage. Hundreds of candles of beeswax were placed in the chandeliers. Ilara stood before the mirror. The dress Alaric had chosen was a pale gold color, almost champagne. It was made of a silk so fine it seemed woven with moonbeams. The bodice was embroidered with thousands of small pearls. In her neck hung her mother's medallion. The door opened and Alaric entered in a black and gold military gala uniform. "Ilara," he whispered. "I am afraid," she admitted. "They are like wolves, waiting for their prey." "You are the queen of the pack," he said, offering his arm. They descended the grand marble staircase. The murmur in the main hall was deafening, but when the butler announced them, silence fell. They reached the center of the floor. The orchestra began to play. They began to dance, and it was magical. Ilara moved with an innate grace that left everyone speechless. From a corner, the Arthur family watched. Arthur drank glass after glass of wine. "Wait," Cassandra said. "It is almost time." The music ended, and the hall erupted in applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alaric announced, "I toast to my future wife, Ilara." "One moment," Cassandra's shrill voice cut the air. "Excellency, stop everything. There has been a crime." Cassandra advanced to the center. "We have just noticed that a family jewel has disappeared, the sapphire brooch of our mother. We brought it for Ilara, but it is gone." "And what does that have to do with my fiancé?" Alaric asked with coldness. "We saw Ilara lurking near our things," Isabella intervened. "Perhaps she has habits of kleptomania." "That is a lie!" Ilara exclaimed. "Then you will not mind if we check your handbag," Cassandra challenged. A servant brought the bag. Cassandra turned it over. A handkerchief and the heavy brooch of gold and sapphires fell onto the table. The crowd gasped. "Thief!" Isabella screamed. Ilara looked at the brooch, paralyzed. "No, I do not know how that got there." "And she is also an impostor," Cassandra shouted. "She is the bastard daughter of a stable hand. She carries dirty blood." Elena felt her strength leave her. Arthur screamed, Dishonor, if she is not my daughter, I repudiate her. Ilara lowered her head, waiting for the rejection. But Alaric's hand did not let go. He stepped forward with a terrible calm. He took the sapphire brooch and lifted it. Then he looked at Cassandra. "Interesting," Alaric said with a soft voice. "Very interesting, because there is one small detail you have forgotten. You said you brought this jewel today from the family safe. Is that right?" "Yes, Excellency," Cassandra responded. "Curious," Alaric murmured, "because there are two problems with your story. The first is that sapphires do not lose their color, but painted glass does." Alaric squeezed the jewel and pulled out one of the stones, revealing oxidized brass. He threw the fake brooch at Cassandra's feet. "It is a cheap forgery." "We did not know," Isabella stammered. "Silence," the Duke ordered. "The second problem is more serious. You could not bring the original brooch today because I have the original brooch." Rodolfo approached with a velvet box. Alaric opened it, and there was the real brooch glowing with a deep blue fire. 3 months ago, a moneylender contacted me. He offered me a piece that a ruined country gentleman had pawned to pay for his daughter's dresses. I bought it to recover it. Alaric turned toward Isabella and Cassandra. "You knew your father had sold the jewel. You used a copy to incriminate your own sister. And about the accusation of bastardy." He turned toward Ilara, taking her hands. "Nobility is not transmitted by blood. It is demonstrated in acts. You with your silks have shown yourselves to be vulgar. Ilara, with her worked hands, has shown herself to be the only true aristocrat in this room. If anyone here has a problem with the origin of my future wife, the doors are open." No one moved. On the contrary, the guests began to applaud. "Now," Alaric said, "let us talk of justice." He walked toward Arthur. "I have bought all your debts, Arthur. The Larkfield Manor is mine. Everything you possess is technically mine." "Are you going to throw us into the street?" Cassandra asked. Ilara stepped forward. "No," Ilara said with a firm voice. "I will not throw you into the street. You will live in the old overseer's cabin by the river. The main house will be a school for the children of the laborers. You will have to work. If you want to eat, you must grow the food. Perhaps with sweat, you will clean your souls." The guards escorted Arthur and his daughters out of the palace while they cried and kicked. Alaric turned toward Ilara. "You have shown a mercy they did not deserve. I only want them to learn, Alaric. I want to fill my heart only with you." Alaric took a simple gold ring from his pocket. "I feigned poverty to find you," he said, kneeling. "And in my feigned poverty, I found the greatest wealth of the universe. Ilara, do you accept this man to walk together for the rest of our lives?" Ilara smiled radiantly. "I accept the man of the barn. I accept you, Alaric." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her. 5 years later, the sun bathed the gardens of Larkfield Manor. In the small cabin by the river, Isabella and Cassandra worked the land with calloused hands. Arthur sat on a bench, remembering times that would never return. In the distance, a carriage passed. In it were the Duke and Duchess with 2 small children. Ilara wore her mother's medallion, looking at the horizon with serenity. "Do you regret it?" Alaric asked. "Of what?" "Of having fed that beggar one night of storm." Ilara laughed. "That beggar gave me a kingdom, Alaric, but most importantly, he gave me a voice." The journey of the soul is often measured not by the heights one reaches, but by the depths of the compassion one shows when the world is at its coldest. In the tapestry of existence, every thread of kindness we weave into the lives of others becomes a golden cord that eventually binds us to our own true purpose. We often spend our days chasing the shimmering illusions of status and wealth, forgetting that the only currency recognized by eternity is the purity of our intentions and the warmth of our hands. To look upon a fellow human being and see not their rags, but their inherent dignity, is the highest form of wisdom a heart can attain. Cruelty is a poison that eventually consumes the vessel that carries it, while mercy is a healing balm that transforms both the giver and the receiver. Life has a way of turning the tables on the arrogant, reminding us that the sun sets on every empire, yet the light of a single selfless act can shine through the darkest centuries. May we all find the courage to be like the one who offers bread in the storm, for in doing so, we invite the miraculous into our ordinary lives. True nobility is not found in the blood that flows through our veins, but in the love that overflows from our spirits toward those whom the world has forgotten. Let us remember that every person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about, and a simple gesture of grace can be the bridge that leads them and us to a future filled with light and redemption.